Just heard of the Shorty George, got word of the Shorty George. Seems that it's a kind of jig, named for someone about so big. He rambles around the town, preambles around the town, then steps on the crowded street and beats his feet till his feet is beat. Watch him go, and he can, like a real natural man. High stepper is Shorty George, black pepper is Shorty George. He dances to pay the rent and to see that you're solid cent. Say, mister, can you spare a penny? Lady, can you spare a dime? He makes I don't know how many, 'cause he's dancing all the time. Papa's dressed up mighty sporty.
Mama's snoozing in the shade, but while Mama's catching 40, Shorty sees the rent is paid.
Get hip to the Shorty George, hop, skip to the Shorty George. Directions are short and sweet.
I know you beat your feet until your feet is beat.
So catch on to Shorty George and latch on to Shorty George. Good people, I'm telling you that the Shorty George is the dance to do.
Welcome back. You found the Professor Penn podcast. This is David Penn, coming to you on the night of July 2nd, 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, with episode number 126, Symbols. That was the very famous Fred Astaire and Rita Hayworth, leading us off with some symbolism of a time not that far gone, but for most people, probably gone. Good morning, Tanner.
Good morning, David.
Are you familiar with Fred Astaire?
No idea who he is, no.
Great. He was the biggest star of his time, and you're looking at Pornhub circa the 1940s, because that's it right there. The symbolism of that, there's so much rich symbolism. Symbol, symbolism is a way that culture transmits meaning. And this is a cultural symbol, a symbol of a time when uh, we still had political liberalism, but social liberalism was just taking form. We're going to talk about that tonight. And the dance, what can we say? Fred Astaire was a phenomenal dancer. You look at him, you go, where's this guy coming from? And then you watch him dance with the very beautiful and famous Rita Hayworth, and you say, wow, this is quite an exceptional use of the human body in a coordinated fashion with another human, kind of like boxing or fighting. And you have a musical track that is basically influenced by the African American music that was coming forth at that time, which was jazz and blues, and it was in that track. You look at the musicians, everybody's white. Tap dancing, hey, really dominated by black people, but we got white people doing it. This was before the integration of our media, our movies, but the influence of the black community is all over that. We can hear it. I can see it. Can you hear it? Can you see it? And the coordination is fantastic. And of course, at the end, they're holding each other very carefully, and off they go into an obscure space, which we can't see. We can only imagine what's about getting ready to take place. It's symbolism. And that symbolism is a nice way to start out our July 4th week episode. We're going to do a July 2nd episode. We're going to take off the 4th for multiple reasons, which we're going to talk about today. But we're going to just do this one podcast night. We're going to try to cover as much ground as we can. Uh, People need to rediscover the beauty of America's civic holidays and what they symbolize. One of the things that's happened over the course of my lifetime is that the progressive educators who populate our public institutions uh, have done everything they can in their power um, in a very coordinated fashion, but not conspiratorial. It's just how the system works. They're all educated at the same kind of leftist institutions, which is a sidebar. I have to remember to come back to how the progressive educators have basically worked in coordination to destroy our civic holidays, or at least the meaning of the holidays. But I get feedback from time to time on X where people will say, "I'm a fake professor," and they use that, you know, uh, denigration of this stage name to somehow invalidate this podcast and the message in our community. And this is really kind of silly because it is a stage name. But, I've got people that frequently come in and say they've watched every episode, which must mean that there's some sharing of information here that brings people back, which is, very uplifting when I read that. But the point I want to bring out is these people that are criticizing the use of the word professor, which was put in place by my producers, uh, they're in some sense venerating or elevating the actual professors who populate our academic institutions. And if you're a professor of biochemistry or a professor of particle physics, physics, got your PhD in studying some obscure, very scientific issue, you have some very high skill, which is not easy to reproduce. If you're a social science professor, what you're getting paid to do is read books and propagate in our young people the values of the New World Order. And that's what they're doing. So I have to say to these people that criticize me, of course, you know this because that's what you're doing. You're saying if you're not really a professor and you're criticizing the academic institutions, what you're criticizing is the social liberalism which is inherent in the Democrat liberal order, which is purveyed and propagandized by our PhDs. That's what we're doing. So if you look at our schools, if the schools were so good, why is everybody coming out of them anti-American, leftist? Um, really, if they're educated in the social sciences, not employable, because I've tried many times. Got a joke around the company here at Target.com. If you got a college degree, don't apply. Why? Because you don't work. I mean, it takes work you got to dig the money out the side of the mountain with your hands. Just doesn't come, coming down like manna from heaven. But these people a lot of times believe that they're special. They're a special group. They're a special group, like the Jews and the blacks and the gay people, the LBT. How do you say that? LGBTQ
It's the LGBTQ
plus.
plus A.
There.
Yeah.
Thank you. I get screwed up. And, we got these groups and the military veterans and the college professors, we got these groups, we can't criticize them. They're beyond critique. They're beyond critique. They're beyond critique. And if we can't critique these various groups and what they're doing, then we're just going to be a victim of whatever the machine wants to give us. And wow, these groups, they sure criticize when things don't go their way, which we're going to talk about tonight. But a lot of this meaning is in the symbology of July 4th, the commemoration of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and in our flag, and in the Star-Spangled Banner. And those three symbols, July 4th, the flag, and the Star-Spangled Banner, all come together on this holiday, July 4th, this civic holiday. And I thought it would be interesting to look back and try to understand these symbols and how they emerged and what they meant to the people at the time. Because that meaning can be recovered and can refresh the United States of America. I want to understand what 1776 was all about, historically, philosophically, ideationally, spiritually. What were the founders and those patriot citizens who fought for freedom at that time? What was driving them? What was driving them? And because our modern educational system has done such a good job of driving those motivations out of the conversation and in place for those founders giving us slavery and racism as the thing we contemplate, which is not wrong to contemplate. It's not. But can we think about more than one thing at a time? I had the guy that I talk about, this guy that trained me. And, he was the first guy that I heard you can't walk and chew bubble gum at the same time. Now, that's a fairly common idiom, but at the time I'd never heard it before. We are capable of American citizens of dealing with two issues at the same time. And even better, understanding the interplay. The fact that we don't understand it, the fact that things are reduced to sound bites, is the elite educators of our country in our entertainment media and our news media treating us and making us childlike. Stupid, actually. They reduce complex historical issues down to very simple sound bites and isolate us in these sound bites and remove the rich context which our symbology will present to us if we but take the time to look at it. And that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to take a look at it. Well, before we move on, we played Elvis Presley on the last podcast singing Don't Step on My Blue Suede Shoes, which was written by the very famous Carl Perkins. And I just have to tell you, because I came across this, these legendary blue suede shoes, which were immortalized in that song, were sold for $150,000 at an auction last week. So somebody's got more money than good sense because they paid $150,000 for it. But you know what? It's probably a great investment because with inflation, those shoes probably worth $1 million in a few years. So, these were bought. I mean, it's cool. The shoes were worn in the 1950s. They were purchased by an American collector this past Friday. And I just thought, wow, the song is priceless and the shoes are worth 150 G's. I like that, right? Okay, news that matters. Well, the news that matters. A lot of news. It's a lot of news. And here's the way the news works. Again, just like our ideas, they're siloed so that we can't see how all this stuff connects to each other. And that's one of the things we're trying to do together as a community. How do all these ideas relate to each other? Because they're all the same but a little bit different. They all connect. And the Supreme Court ruled, as you know, that presidents are immune from criminal charges for official actions. And boy, did the left go wild over this. The hyperbole was off the charts, just crazy. And what was really going on here? Well, there's a lot going on. One of the things that is going on is the Supreme Court is starting to intervene. And this is a lesson to those on the right, who pilloried the court for not taking up the state's challenge to the election that was led by Texas and Attorney General Ken Paxton right after the 2020 election. The Supreme Court wouldn't even hear the case. And everybody went, those bastards. Those bastards. Well, the court has its own history, its own traditions. The people that are on that court are not stupid. These are people that are learned. That's what it is to be a judge. To be a judge, to devote yourself to the law. And I mean to devote it at a scholarly level, not like an ambulance chaser. Most of the attorneys, they're just in it for the money, unfortunately. They wrap themselves in the cloth of our civic responsibilities and our traditions of, we're living under the rule of law instead of the divine right of kings and queens, which is great. It's a great story. It's a great story. Unfortunately, in most cases, it's not true because we have a society that's been corrupted by the post-World War II Democrat liberal order, which was an overthrow of the Republicanism that was the founding of this country. And it's time to understand these two ideas through the symbology of July 4th and the Star-Spangled Banner and the flag. Time to understand it. Time to look back at it because it really doesn't have to be reinvented. Everybody's going to resonate with it. That's the great thing about symbols. You can put them under a bushel basket, but there's still a lamp. You can see there's light there. We got to understand what were people thinking at the time of the Revolutionary War. And how are we thinking now? Well, right now, we're thinking very materialistically under the rubric of the post-World War II Democrat liberal order. And that liberal order is really involved with social liberalism, which it means it's about me. It's all about me. The Republicanism that was part of this country when it was founded was also a worldview. We're going to talk about that. That was also a liberal philosophy, but it was political liberalism. And what we've done in our country over the last 248 years is we've switched out very systematically for very specific reasons. We've switched out political liberalism and we've replaced it with social liberalism. And that social liberalism has been used to destroy the very republicanism that gave birth to it. Isn't that interesting? We're going to have to go through that because, boy, when we understand that and how simple it is, all the pieces of the puzzle just start to fit together and we have the basis to move forward. using our own symbols, our own history, and to refresh everything with that. We don't have to work so hard. We don't have to work so hard. It's a lot easier to keep going what's already good than it is to tear it down if the people know what the stakes of the game are. That's why we say the people are coming. But the Supreme Court, man, they got involved. They got involved, and all the people on the right had been saying the court's terrible. Oh, now the court's great. Court's great. Fantastic. And on the left, they're always saying rule of law, rule of law, rule of law. We got to hold Trump accountable. We've got to follow the Constitution. Oh, it's great. The Supreme Court didn't rule. They're all happy. Now they got a bad ruling. Now they want to nullify the court. You know, both these groups, left and right, see, this is this polarity of BS. Both of these groups are doing the same thing. We're for the rule of law when it suits us, and when it doesn't, we're not. Having some faith in our institutions is part of being an American. Having some faith in a creator that granted us unalienable rights. You know, that's there. You know, that there's a creator involved in this thing. Something that when you remove that, oh, these people suck. And they do. They do. They all have feet of clay on their own. But when you have that creator part to it, oh, maybe the court waited and waited and waited and saw that the legislative branches were unable to deal with the clash of ideologies, which is the Republicanism of 1776 is reasserting itself and confronting the liberalism, the social liberalism of the New World Order, confronting it and saying, whoa, please stop. We're not going this one step farther. And the court laid back for a long time and it finally said, okay, you know what? You guys aren't getting it. We're the third branch of government. We're going to put a governor on this process. But it really cuts a lot of different ways. And I just want to comment on two, because this thing is a very intense decision. And this has happened before, and we don't know what the outcome's going to be. Because if you remember, before the Civil War, the court was also facing forces that could tear the Union apart. So they rendered the Dred Scott decision, which is much maligned and pilloried, and we ended up in a, constitutional crisis and a civil war nonetheless. But that decision was aimed at keeping the Union together, as was this one, and I'll share with you how. The prosecution of Trump, right, wrong, or indifferent, is polarizing the country and tearing it apart. The justices see that, but they see over the next hill. They see a Trump victory, and they listen to what people say. They're not sitting in some kind of temple as oracles. They're in the mix. They're watching the news. They're watching everything everybody says. They're political. They are political. And on the right, Professor Penn has been calling for truth commissions where these people can come in and tell us what they did and why, and then they can go live their lives to bind the society together, like was attempted in South Africa. That doesn't seem to have worked either, but at least it's something other than straight retribution, that's what the calls are. So let's say we have a Trump presidency, and now we're going to have retribution. In what? We're going to indict here as we the people, President Obama, President Biden, President Clinton, Hillary Clinton, General Kelly. I mean, the list can just go, General Milley. We're going to indict all these people, right? Well, some are going to, if they're down the trough, okay, they're subject to trouble. But if they're an ex-president and they're alive, this is going to immunize them from prosecution in the coming administration. And I'm not saying the coming administration would have necessarily indicted a President Obama or a President Clinton. I don't know. That's fortune telling. But the court's making it not easy to do. And I don't think, want to become the kind of country where if you become a president, the next group that comes in is going to send you to jail or hang you. because that is going to definitely be a disincentive to the very best of us getting involved in politics to lead us in getting out of this mess. And you see what happens when the very best of us is not leading. I just have to comment for a minute about that debate. I mean, we all saw it. Okay, so Biden, that's an issue. How about the lie? The lie that we've been told for 3 years about the competency, about the lie that we were told when President Biden was elected, that he was competent. Because this kind of cognitive decline didn't start last week. This has been going on, and all the people around him know about it. And they were willing to sell us this figment of their imagination because it worked for them. They got him elected. And if they're willing to lie at this level, to this degree, about a man's competency under stress, it's different when you stand in front of a teleprompter and you read things and you're an actor. That's different. It's a different kind of brain. I'm talking about under the stress of a confrontation, the kind of stress that might confront a president if there was a military crisis or a natural disaster, so that he was thinking clearly, could make the right decisions for my family. This man doesn't have that competency. It's very evident. Now, they're going to spin it and say he does, and they're going to run him out there and show him, very, cogent for sound bites, and then say, see, he's fine. But that wasn't fine. And that's an issue in and of itself. But the lying and the willingness of American citizens to lie to themselves in pursuit of political liberalism and social liberalism, they're mixed together now. Political liberalism is being used as a cover story to promote this social liberalism, which is really dividing the country. And Biden is the standard bearer for social liberalism. That's the most outstanding accomplishments of his 4 years has been a strengthening, a deepening of the social liberal impulses of the left, which they use to do what? To negate Republicanism. And that's what we're going to talk about through a discussion of symbology. So Trump's immune. They're going crazy on the left. And maybe the court sees this in very life and death terms. Tanner, can you play number 2? How would you like to be at the beach on the 4th of July? Because that beach scene is, it's a stock image. Wouldn't you agree, Tanner? It's pretty much a stock image.
Yeah.
Could be a beach anywhere. And you're sitting at the beach with your family, and suddenly comes raining down cluster bombs, or at least that's the allegation. This is the scene in Crimea that we talked about on the last podcast, where an ATACMS missile discharged its ordnance over a civilian populated beach. Now, that maybe doesn't have anything to do with the Trump immunity case, but it was President Biden who authorized this attack, which led to the killing of civilians on this beach and the injuring of over 100 Russian civilians. It's different, but I'll tell you what, it's related. It's related. And at the very same time, Let's just play this number 3. Let's play number 3.
We have to find and to prepare this plan and to put this plan on the table during months. We don't have too much time because we have a lot of wounded and dead people on the battlefield and through civilians. That's why we don't want to have this war during years. So that's why we want to prepare this joint plan, put it on the table to the second peace summit.
Second Peace Summit. So here's Zelensky suing for peace. Of course, that didn't get a lot of mainstream media play. Did you know about that? That's from last week. Did you see that President Zelensky came out and asked for a peace conference?
No.
No. Why not? Because our government, that's we the people, and our leader, President Joe Biden, is all in on using up the Ukrainians as proxies for a war with the Russians. And the Ukrainians are just running out of people. It's destroying their country and their culture. So even Zelensky, whose wife just was purchased a $450,000 automobile, it was $2.5 million. I can't remember. It was a Bugatti. It was just all over the news. He bought. Isn't that nice? Civil servant, there for the people. A Republican, after all, buys his wife one of the most expensive vehicles. I think it was $2.5 million. Could have been $4.5 million. I need to look it up. I didn't know such a car existed. See, this is the difference between the Democrat liberal order, which switches out political liberalism with social liberalism, and the original Republicanism, which was part of our 1776 mindset. We're going to talk about what that was. That was a way of thinking. That was a philosophy, and it's embedded in the symbology of July 4th, in our Constitution, in the Declaration of Independence, and in our flag, and in the Star-Spangled Banner. It's all there for us to rediscover. Which Zelensky is no Republican. He's robbing and stealing with both hands. And now he's asking for peace because it's not going too good. But Joe Biden, and all the people that are at the top of this government, and all the rest of the globalists in the European Union and NATO, they're all in on this confrontation with Putin and the Russians. But the people are coming. People are coming right here in Minnesota. Go to that primary, August 13th. Vote for peace. Vote for Royce White. Get all your people out. Do you have your lists of 20? And do your 20 have lists of 20? And if you're in Minnesota and you're an officer of the party, are you working your calls and getting out in the street and getting people to that primary? We got to get people to the primary and elect the one and only endorsed Min GOP candidate here in Minnesota. That's Royce White. And it's happening all over the world. The people are coming. In France, just a couple days ago, Le Pen's conservative movement, which in the liberal media that you're watching the mainstream, it's the far right, meaning Nazis, which is another BS story, which we covered extensively here on the Professor Penn podcast. The Nazis were not a right-wing group. They were to the right of the communists, but they were a leftist organization. It was the National Socialist Workers' Party. The National Socialist Workers' Party. What was the difference? They were a socialist workers' party that believed in nationalism, in the Volk, in the people, in Germany. They weren't workers of the world unite like the communists. They weren't a transnational one world governance organization unless the world governance was Nazi. So they were not a right-wing group. They were to the right of the communists. Got to get that straight. But they call this Le Pen conservative group far right, trying to evoke Nazism and the Holocaust, can always pull out the Jew card. Boy, if we go for this nationalism, it's going to be another Holocaust. That's their trump card, so to speak, to scare we the people away from wanting to have a country. Because if we have a country, we're not going to have one world government, are we? If we're not going to have one world government, all these bureaucrats and technocrats have to get real jobs. Well, guess what? You get a job. Thank you, Tanner. It kind of comes out sometimes. Sometimes the motivation is just so simple. And the Democrat liberal order, they just want the easy money. And they want us to work so they can be vampires and suck our blood. It's nothing more complicated to it than that at one level. The next level is what we're going to talk about. They call this the National Rally, the Rally Nationale, and it won this first round of parliamentary elections this past Sunday. They did a great job. They got 34% of the vote. That'd be we the people. I mean, the people are coming people. And the New World Order people, they got a paltry at max 23%. That's Macron's group. He's President Macron. He's an unrepentant globalist. So the people are coming everywhere. They're getting off the bench. They're getting in the game. They're going to precinctstrategy.com. We're recognizing that we're the cavalry. I have Miss Professor Penn make fun of me. No. I'm an American citizen, and I know what's going on. And all of you are learning with me what's going on. So what they're intending to take away from us is the national character of this country, which is a creator who grants us certain unalienable rights. And that's critical. I mean, that's just critical. And that's why I start out these podcasts, to turn the on switch on for a special hour and a half with you, but to let these people know, to let them know that we believe in the search for truth. That's the essence of Republicanism. That's the essence of it. We're going to talk about it. And the essence of the Democrat liberal order, the New World Order, the post-World War II Democrat liberal order, is the scientific method and expunging the search for truth. It's a radical ideational shift away from 5,700 years of human culture and experience. It's an experiment in thinking, and it's a failed experiment. We can see it all around us. It fails for the people, and it succeeds only for the oligarchs and the technocrats that seek to rule over us. I swore once I won't do it twice. Instead, blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the light and the dark. I like letting them know who I am. Do you like letting them know who you are? Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating me in your image. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for making me an American. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for healing the blind. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for feeding the people. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for releasing the bound. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for raising up the downtrodden. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the heavens and earth. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for providing for all my needs. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for directing my path. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for our American courage. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for crowning America with glory. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for restoring strength to the weary. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for sending your only Son to die on the cross that I might be saved. Forgive us, our Father, for we have sinned. And forgive me, my Father, for I have sinned. Pardon us, my King, and pardon me, my King, for I have willfully transgressed. For you pardon and forgive. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds, who is gracious and ever willing to forgive. I've sinned, but we all, by losing what it is to be an American. Maybe it's a sin of omission, but we allowed it. We allowed it. We allowed it collectively, particularly in my generation. We wholeheartedly adopted the New World Order, because of the social liberalism, the benefits of social liberalisms, which we took for ourselves without thinking what it was going to do to the character and the history of the country. And now at this late hour, the people that still have the energy and the insight and have a memory are rising up throughout the country, and young leaders are rising up, like Royce White here in Minnesota. And the Supreme Court, which are people a little bit older than me, are saying, that's enough. We're going to stop this now. We're going to stop this because we know what you're doing. We know who you are. We figured it out. Yeah, we were conned. Great job, you conned us. When the con is discovered by the marks, the con men run away. All we need to do is spread the truth, and the truth will set us free. All over the world it's happening in France. And in Russia, Putin's response to that attack on his civilian population, and I want you to think back to the bloodlust that was in our country if you were alive on 9/12, 9/13, 9/14, 9/15, 10/15, 11/15, 12/15. The unity we had as a country in seeking revenge for the deaths of our fellow citizens that we were believing was caused by an attack by this group Al-Qaeda that was domiciled in Afghanistan. The desire, the unity that we had that empowered President Bush and Dick Cheney to lead us into a 25-year debacle, which goes on to this day in the Middle East, that was us. And President Putin is encountering the exact same bloodlust from his Russian population because they're watching American-made and American-supplied ATACMS missiles kill civilians. Kind of like a terrorist attack, right? On a beach, on a sunny day. Beautiful. It's a beautiful beach. And what does Putin do? He doubles down on his calls for peace. But he's a dictator. He's an ass. Can't trust him. Maybe. But right now, he's calling for peace. Zelensky is calling for peace. The administration is dealing with a very difficult hand here with President Biden. A lot of complicated things going on. I have some faith in this process. I just do. I do. I guess we'll talk about eschatology when we get back together. But I have faith. I have faith. I have faith. I have faith that we, the people, are going to figure this out. I think Winston Churchill said, America will always do the right thing after trying all the wrong things first. Maybe we're getting there now. The Pentagon says that North Korean troops will be cannon fodder if they're sent to the Ukraine. So we just saw in the last podcast that President Putin and Kim Jong-un have formed a security relationship. And right away, the Koreans are saying, hey, we'll send troops. If everybody else is sending troops, we're sending troops. So what our Pentagon is saying, we're going to kill them. Now that contributes to peace, doesn't it? The EU is expected to sign a new security agreement with the Ukraine. Everybody is guaranteeing the Ukraine, the United States, individual countries, now the EU in general. What it is a giant amount of investment, military investment, training investment, infrastructure investment, all kinds of investment in the Ukraine. And to continue this proxy war against the Russians as if it's going to stay at a low level like this, not escalate. And it's escalating all the time. Oh, here's another escalation. CNN reports that President Biden will pay U.S. military contractors, that's another name for mercenaries, to work inside the Ukraine. We have companies, we know this, right, that we have U.S. companies domiciled, probably not domiciled in the United States for liability reasons, that employ ex-U.S. military personnel, and then they go on the payroll of the State Department, also in that black bag area, it's the CIA, and they get deployed all over the world, and they do all kinds of military jobs, and it's not really the United States. I mean, come on. Who's that kidding? Only us, because it's part of the long con. Let me think. They're armed by the U.S. military. They dress like the U.S. military or in the local garb. They're Americans. They're former U.S. military. They get paid to kill people. They're pursuing U.S. foreign policy, but it has nothing to do with we the people. Who are we kidding here? It's another escalation of putting U.S. boots on the ground in the Ukraine. I just have to say, wow. Just have to say, wow. Here's a good one. I like this one. Court orders Israeli army to start drafting the ultra-Orthodox. And I've said many times that when Israel was formed, there was no religious people there. The religious people did not go to Israel. They came to the United States. And why? Because they could worship freely here in their own way. They knew it. That was part of the political liberalism of the founding of our country. That's why our founding documents don't identify Christianity, but they identify a creator. Our founders, the framers of our government, were dealing with this issue. And the Jewish Orthodox people came to the United States. I know because that's where I come from. That's me. And the Zionists, who were leftists, who didn't believe in God, they were anti-Jews. They were children of a new ideology called the New World Order. On the payroll of the crown, zipped over to Israel and took it over. And the quid pro quo, we get a country to escape the ravages of anti-Semitism in Europe, and we'll be a forward firing base for the New World Order. We'll help you control the Suez Canal and the oil fields. It was a great deal. The religious didn't want any part of it because the religious believe that killing people is a sin. They don't distinguish between the private citizen killing another private citizen or the killing of a combatant dressed in a uniform. They don't make that distinction because they're not so easily fooled. They know that God did not support the slaying of Abel. Instead, he said, I hear Abel's blood crying out to me from the sand. So they didn't want to do it. So why did the Orthodox go to Israel? I've said this, because they looked and they said, man, these unbelievers are in control of the holy sites. We got to get over there and protect the holy sites. So they went. But they had no intention to support the state of Israel. That's why they don't get drafted. From 1948 till last week, ultra-Orthodox Jews did not have to fight. But you know what? Hey, this is the Supreme Court. Supreme Court of Israel said, you guys have to fight now. Because what they want to do is make sure that faith gets killed. Sorry, happens to be the facts, in my opinion. So here's what a very famous, I got to find the guy's name because it's, there's an ultra-Orthodox party called the Shas Party. Shas, S-H-A-S. And the Shas Party promotes the ideology of the ultra-Orthodox. And, of course, they're responding to that court's ruling, and here's what they said. The Jewish people survived persecutions, pogroms, and wars only by thanks to maintaining their uniqueness, the Torah, and the commandments. This is our secret weapon against all enemies, as promised by the creator of the universe, Aryeh Deri said to the Times of Israel. Yeshiva students, those are the ultra-Orthodox students in school, preserve our special power and generate miracles in the military campaign. So their theory is that when they're praying for the survival of the Jewish people, that's more important than going and shouldering a gun. And you know what? We have this argument right here at Tireget. I believe in miracles. And my closest associate, who I love, Rob, also believes in God, but he says the Lord helps those who helps themselves. So here we have it right here in this deal. The Supreme Court said, yeah, okay, great. But you know what? The Lord's going to help those that help themselves. Pick up a gun, hit the field. Well, this is an ongoing issue. This is an interesting issue within Israel, which is something that we're tracking on, because in Israel and in the Muslim side are two groups that truly believe in the search for truth. I'm not saying either one of them is right, but if you wanted to finish off the search for truth, you'd get these two groups all spun up and crazy and full of evil and hatred and pit them against each other and let them kill each other off. And that would take care of the search for truth on planet Earth. Something to think about. Special operators have sent an open letter of concern, warning us that there's about to be a lot of terrorism in the United States. Well, Special Operators Association of America. Sounds like a non-affiliated group, doesn't it? I guess they're getting us ready. That's called predictive programming. Economy continues to be awful, even though they tell us it's good. Walgreens shares crashed 20%, and they warned that there was worse than expected consumer spending in an environment. They're going to close lots of stores, and hey, that's Walgreens. Walgreens is closing stores. Southwest Airlines, the number one budget carrier, their stock took a huge hit of over 10% because their business sucks. You know, people have no money to spend, so they're going to keep this hamster wheel spinning as long as they can. They may make it to the election. They may not. They may not. They may not make it. What will it look like if they don't make it? Well, it's going to look like the stock market's going to go down a third because people are going to freak out and run for the exits. When's that going to happen? I don't know, but it's going to happen. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. And you know, if you got a 401k, you can't get your money out. So you're just going to have to ride it like a roller coaster. I know people are going to be looking forward to this as a buying opportunity. Something to think about. Well, we're going to talk about Steve Bannon. We're going to talk about Steve Bannon because yesterday on July 2nd, Steve Bannon went to jail. Here's that aforementioned Supreme Court, which just made this ruling that was widely vilified by the left and applauded by the right. And the couple days before, it was flipped on its head, right? Because, you know, people should be quiet and just let the judges do their thing. But no, that's not the way we're going to roll. And then we're going to blame each other for undermining the rule of law. Great work, kids. Supreme Court this past Friday turned aside Steve Bannon's last bid to delay his July 1st deadline to report for prison. So I was talking to Royce after the basketball game, the Big Three game this past Saturday, and I said, when are you going to be home? And he goes, I'm going to Connecticut. And I said, you're going to see Steve off to his 4-month hiatus in Danbury, eh? And he said, yes, I am. And that's what he did. And could you please play number 4?
Love you, brother.
Royce White is the Republican nominated candidate in Minnesota running against Klobuchar, another neoliberal neocon.
We won't take a single back step. That's the bottom line. You can throw him in jail all you want to, but we will not take a single back step. We understand the threat of communism. We can read. We have computers. Black people are waking up to it. You're praying that we don't wake up to it, but I'll see to it that they will. We will not take a single back step. We love this man right here. He's an American hero. It's a shame that you let this happen. And they're coming for you next. You better understand that. You can cheer now. These idiots back here can cheer now. But when the gulag opens up, all of you will be in it next. Understand that. God bless America. Love you, brother.
Love you, man. Hold it. Royce White is running in Minnesota on Thursday, the Declaration of Independence, July 4th. Where are you going to be, Royce?
The heart of corruption. The Federal Reserve. You all know how the money works? I'm sure you all know how the money works. You don't like Steve because he knows how the money works. A man who went to Harvard, who was in the Navy, and who worked on Wall Street is never supposed to talk about how the system actually works. All of you know. You know what it is to be a wage slave. You know what it is to be a serf. You know you're being crushed. And yet you peddle the narrative anyway. It's disgusting.
Why on July 4th, why are you leading, you're running a campaign, why are you leading a march like you did during the situation in Minneapolis in June of 2020? Why you led a march to the Federal Reserve? Why are you going to do it now?
After George Floyd died, the focus was on police. The focus should not be on police. The global corporate community is stealing from the American people. They're getting wise to it. The Federal Reserve is the heart of the corruption. That's the bottom line. The Federal Reserve is the heart of the way the whole thing works. And we're going to go march back there where it all started on July 4th.
All right. In the Fed. In the Fed.
Thank you, Tanner. That was a quite poignant scene. For those of you who are in Minnesota and would like to attend that rally, that'll be up on the campaign website, I'm sure. We have a little improv protest on July 4th because of the symbolism. Look at those flags in that scene. Go back and look at it. This means something. Time to recover what it means. Time to recover what it means. Now, I'm going to ask Tanner to play number 6 because this is so important. Number 6, please.
People ask me, what can we do? Listen, pray for our enemies. I don't have time. Do not write a letter to me at all. It will not be read. I am not going to take a second to read your letters. I'm not. Because you know why? I don't want you taking time to write a letter. I want you to get to work. This is all about victory. This is victory or nothing. There's no substitute for victory here. There is no substitute for victory. You know that. I know that. Use your time. Husband your resources and use your time. And your time is not sending me some missive in prison that I'm not going to read. You know why I'm not going to read it? Because I'm going to be working outside of my job in prison. I will be working the rest of the hours on what? Total and complete victory.
That's what we got to do. We got to work on total and complete victory. So what Steve is saying is, don't take your time for frivolous things now. This is it. This is the moment. Go to precinctstrategy.com. Get in the game. We need people to come into the party to make the party Republican. We're going to talk about that very soon, to make it Republican. Right now, it's Democrat, liberal order. We need it to be Republican. We need our candidates to be Republicans. Republicans in their minds, in their hearts, in their actions. We're going to talk about that. That's the critical thing we're going to work on now. What is it to be a Republican? Because it's a beautiful thing. A beautiful thing. And we lost it. And when did we lose it? When did we lose it?
We live in neo-feudalism. This is not capitalism. This is where you have a underclass, right? A lumpen proletariat almost that's taken care of by the state. You have the very wealthy, and you have this kind of neo-feudalist working class and middle class in the middle that pays for everything. And the guys at the top, we've socialized the risk, that $1 trillion of infusion, right? Remember, the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve on the morning of September 18th, 2008, when they're in the Oval Office talking, is $880 billion. The balance sheet of the Federal Reserve on January 17th or January 20th of 2017, when Donald Trump raises his hand, is $4.5 trillion. The most progressive president in the history of our country, President Obama, saved the wealthy. And here's how they did it. They just turned on the taps of liquidity. We call it, the technical term is quantitative easing. Right. The not technical term is called bailing out the people who are guilty. Okay? So essentially, if you owned anything, you had the greatest 10-year run in history.
Wait.
Yeah.
Let's move to the TARP vote and whether you think, so now all of that is happening.
You have to do TARP, the first one you have to do. Yeah. You know why? Your fiduciary, when a guy like Bernanke walks in and says, I need $1 trillion, right? You don't have time to debate. History's going to look at you, and he says, the American financial system's going to collapse in 72 hours, and the world financial system 2 days after that, you have global anarchy. There's not a person on earth. I don't hear these libertarians and all these, free market, let capitalism take place. Right. No. When they come in and ask for the first trillion in an emergency, I believe you have to say, okay, we got to do it. I don't know what went on here, but if you're telling me this is going to save me and at least get down the road, I'll do it. But remember, that's the first trillion. We kept on for another $3.5 trillion. $3.5 trillion. This is just bailing out the people that caused the problems. Got to think about it for a second. Goldman Sachs didn't lose any equity. None of the partners really missed any bonus payments. None of GE still in business. AIG, it all still exists. All the donors. Okay, the reverse side of this, remember, there is a corollary to this. It's quite powerful. And we know from the notes of the Federal Reserve, a guy named Richard Fisher, the president of the Federal Reserve of Dallas, argued this in the room constantly. He said, by doing this quantitative easing, which you're just flooding the zone with liquidity, we will save the institutions. And we will save anybody that's a big real estate holder or a hedge fund or bank. But he said, there's a huge reverse here. Number one, savings accounts, you're going to go to zero interest rates. Savings accounts are going to go to zero. So 5,000 years of the Western tradition back to the Marty Bannons, which is be a good householder. Get a wife, get a mortgage, get some kids, and you save your money. Well, now if you save money, you're a sucker because it's broken the trust. That's the trust is broken. If you save money, you're a jerk because you're not going to get any interest payment. In fact, the bank's going to charge you. So there's been no, you can't put money away to save into the system. Number two, the pension funds. The pension funds are going to be destroyed. Today we have a $9.5 trillion gap between the obligations of the pension funds and what we've earned off the pension funds. Why? Because it went to zero interest rates and the bonds that they can buy have no juice in them. Right? The other thing is public schools and all this. Even communities that are not leveraged can't issue bonds because there's no juice in the bonds because the negative interest rate is 1.5%. We've essentially put the burden on the bailout on the working class and middle class. That's why nobody owns anything. Right. But the millennials today are nothing but the 19th century Russian serfs. They're better fed. They're better clothed. They're in better shape. They have more information than anybody in the world at any point in time. But they don't own anything. They're not going to own anything, okay? And they're 20%. If you mark in time against their parents, they're 20% behind in their income, and there's no pension plan in the future. They're all gig economy. We've literally destroyed the middle class in this country. Okay. And both political parties. By the way, this is not about Republicans and Democrats. Right. This is the way the system works, and this is the way the system comes together to protect itself and to move itself forward. Okay? And so because nobody understands even the rudimentaries of finance, right? And they keep the public kind of economically illiterate.
What Steve is talking about is how under the Obama administration, the last vestiges of the republic were destroyed through corruption. It's time to pull out what republicanism means, what it meant, how it's symbolized in our flag, in our Star-Spangled Banner, and understand that the Republican is the only form of government which is not eternally at open or secret war with the rights of mankind. That's Thomas Jefferson. And as it relates to finance, if the vast majority of the population is never going to own anything and they're being asked to pay for this bailout of the very uber wealthy, who actually were the criminals that caused the problem in the first place, then that would be an open or secret war against the rights of the citizens. What I do say is that no man is good enough to govern another man without the other's consent. I say this is the leading principle, the sheet anchor of American republicanism. That'd be Abraham Lincoln, railing against the oligarchs that the government under Obama bailed out. Why did he do it? He's a leftist. He did it to destroy the last vestiges of republicanism, to shatter the trust between the people and the institutions, to make the people not want to invest in the institutions, because his goal in the Cloward and Piven model was to break the Constitution of the United States. That's what the whole thing was about. That's why he was very honest. He said, I'll fundamentally transform the United States of America. Pretty fundamental, from republicanism to the New World Order. That's what we're going to dig into now. The further the departure from direct and constant control by the citizens, the less has the government of the ingredient of republicanism. That's Thomas Jefferson reminding us that if we don't do it, we gave it up on our own. Oh, here's a good one. Republicanism is not the phantom of a deluded imagination. On the contrary, laws, under no form of government, are better supported, liberty and property better secured, or happiness more effectually dispensed to mankind. That'd be George Washington, someone that was a slave owner that's kind of getting on the down low now. Here's someone that Tanner's not going to remember, Dr. Benjamin Rush. Do you remember Dr. Benjamin Rush?
I don't.
He's one of the signers of the Declaration. Probably need to look at him. He was a brilliant man. And he said, I have always considered Christianity as the strong ground of republicanism. In other words, republicanism is a philosophy. Here's a good one. It was by the sober sense of our citizens that we were safely and steadily conducted from monarchy to republicanism, and it is by the same agency alone that we can be kept from falling back. Aha! So we have the divine right of kings, the hereditary right, the aristocracy, in collusion with the church. That's the old way, the old world order. That's conservatism. Political liberalism was our form of government. Freedom of speech, the right to assemble, rule of law, due process, equality. All the issues that came forward in our founding documents were repudiation of empire, but more importantly, a repudiation of the aristocracy. The aristocracy, which Steve Bannon is talking about, Obama bailed out and created an American aristocracy that was beyond responsibility for their actions. Like a king. That's why this Supreme Court ruling is so interesting and why the left is so interested in making it seem as if we've created a king. They'll do anything. They'll use anything. That's not what the ruling says. That's the hyperbole of the left. But they're using the images of kingship and of immunity to justify their own destruction of our institutions. They'll use anything. After all, they're professors. Religion and virtue are the only foundations, not of just republicanism, but of all free government, and of the social felicity under all government and in all combinations of human society. That's John Adams. John Adams is nice enough to say that I don't believe that my culture is the truth and yours is a myth. I love my culture. Hey, go do your thing too. Pretty cool. If, then, the control of the people over the organs of their government be the measure of its republicanism, and I confess I know of no other measure, it must be agreed that our governments have much less of republicanism than they ought to have been expected. In other words, the people have less regular control over their agents than their rights and their interests require. Then the people have less regular control over their agents, that would be our elected representatives, than the people's rights and interests require. Sounds like a new comment? No, it's Thomas Jefferson. This problem goes back a long way because Jefferson was the founder of the Democrat Republicans, which was the party of the people, the populist movement, the roots of the Republican Party. And Hamilton was the Federalist, the centralization of power, the national bank, the creation of an aristocracy. This problem goes back to day one, and we trace it back and we understand that this tension's been going on the whole time. We can start to clarify what's going on here. I love Benjamin Rush. He was a doctor, first medical school in the country, and he warned that if the citizens didn't self-govern, there would be a medical tyranny. We profess to be Republicans, and yet we neglect the only means of establishing and perpetuating our Republican forms of government. That is, the universal education of our youth in the principles of Christianity by means of the Bible. For this divine book, above all others, favors that equality among mankind, that respect for just laws, and all those sober and frugal virtues which constitute the soul of republicanism. So there it is in sum. Benjamin Rush is saying that the principles of Christianity by means of the Bible, because the book is divine, above all others, all other means of educating youth, favors that equality among mankind, that respect for just laws, and all those sober and frugal virtues which constitute the soul of republicanism, not as a party, but as a worldview. As a worldview. The values and ideals of republicanism are foundational in the Constitution and history of the United States. As the United States Constitution prohibits granting titles of nobility, republicanism in this context does not refer to a political movement. Political scientists and historians have described the central values of republicanism as liberty and the belief in inalienable individual rights, recognizing the sovereignty of individual people as the source of all authority in law, rejecting monarchy, aristocracy, and hereditary political power, and that virtue and faithfulness in the performance of civic duties and the vilification of corruption is the bedrock of republicanism. In other words, this was a political philosophy, a liberal philosophy, a liberal political philosophy, which grew up and emerged from the people to throw off the yoke of empire and the burden of living in a kingship or queenship that was united in an unholy alliance with the church. It was corrupt. It was vile. It represented the needs and the goals and the political aspirations of a very small group of people who then wrapped themselves in the cloth of faith and said that they were kings and queens. It's ridiculous. I thought about this when I was putting on my underwear this morning. You know, I didn't get my right foot through just the way I wanted to. You know, King Charles has a worse time with it than I am. I bet somebody dresses him. This guy is just a guy. But we got people that believe he's the king and that that's okay. And republicanism was the rejection of that. Rejection of the divine right of kings. That's what we're dealing with here. A political ideology. And we don't even know that. We think republicanism is a party. It's not a party. It's a philosophy that the party is supposed to advance. Above all, that there will be no corruption in our government. And that our government, a Republican government, rests on the search for truth. That's what it rests on. But not tied to any specific religious sect. Offering us freedom of religion. That's republicanism. And what happened? Got hijacked. Fought a war, fought two wars. In fact, we've been at constant war since the moment of 1776 and before. The people that hold on to the Republican philosophy have been besieged in that war with those that hold on to the Democrat liberal order philosophy. That there is a political philosophy that's rooted in the search for truth and to love your neighbor as you wish to be loved and to serve selflessly and beyond any hint of corruption. That is opposed by the concentration of power in few hands instead of the search for truth, the origin of the species. In other words, if I'm strong enough to enslave you, that's a good thing because that's evolution. That the British business model of slavery, drugs, and piracy, which is rooted in the crown, that's their model. And it still exists to this day. This tension's going on in this election, we've got candidates like Royce White who believe in American citizenship and borders and peace. And we got candidates like Amy Klobuchar who believe in one world government, who believe in democracy as a worldwide philosophy. That would be the Democrat liberal order, in social liberalism in place of political liberalism, and driving that social liberalism right into the heart of the very political freedoms that characterize republicanism, to destroy it. Because what do they want to get to? Those underpinnings of self-governance that are associated with the search for truth. They are trying to create a worldwide one governance dictatorship. And then they blame President Trump that he's going to be a dictator. You know, it's right out of the classic Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radicals. Blame your opponents for what you're up to yourself. These people, their con's blown. It's just how quick you can get this information out to the people on your list of 20. How quick can you do it? And how quick can you get them to make their list of 20? How quickly can we get this long con revealed so that the citizens just go, hey, run away. This isn't even, it's ridiculous. You people are ridiculous because you people are ridiculous. And the longer they act, the longer they continue to act on their high horse, and they're revealed as they lose what assholes they are. It'll just going to accelerate their demise and their disappearance. Well, we can go back now. It's going to be July 4th. We're not going to have a show because we're all going to be with our families on the night of July 4th after we go to the march to the Federal Reserve here in downtown Minneapolis. We're going to see lots of images of our flag, and that's associated with the Star-Spangled Banner, which is associated with July 4th. And it's time for us to really come to grips for what this all means. Tanner, can you put up the picture of the American and British flags? Okay, so what do we see in that British flag? What's the first thing that jumps out at you, Tanner?
The red.
The red what?
Just the cross. I guess the two
cross.
crossing crosses.
That cross, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what does it symbolize? It symbolizes the king and his divine right given to him by Christ who died on the cross. It is an affirmation and a symbol of empire and monarchy. And to this day, that's what it symbolizes. Below it is the flag that flew over Fort McHenry in 1814 when Francis Scott Key penned the poem, The Star-Spangled Banner. There's no cross. The stars represent, this is a proto-flag. There's 15 stripes, red and white stripes. We're down to 13 for the original colonies. They had their reason for the way they did it then. But this is about the people. Each star is a state. The state is comprised of people. This is a symbol of republicanism, a symbol of the power of the people to self-govern as a juxtaposition to that cross where the king, with his divine right, rules over us, we're his subjects. These are the two symbols. So why did the Star-Spangled Banner come up? Why did that become so important? Why did that song, how did that become our national anthem? And why is this flag so important? And why is the flag, because they'll replace this flag, because this flag is a symbol of republicanism, not the party, but the philosophy of individual rights, freedom of religion, the right to assemble, the right to due process, the freedom of speech that comes in the Republican philosophy. This is a repudiation of empire. These two, and so on 1814, because we had the Revolutionary War in 1776. We've been fighting with the British the whole time. We're fighting with them right now. We just don't recognize it. We think of them as an ally, but actually they're working us through our academic institutions because our academic elites have bought into a world governance strategy, a long con perpetrated by the crown and other monarchs of Europe. They funded it. Go back and look at it. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's just history that people don't want to look at. Where did all this global climate, one world governance, NATO, where did all this come from? Where did this one world governance come from? It came from the idea of empire. The United States of America was set up as a nation state in repudiation of empire. And here we've been conquered ideologically by the idea of one world government, by empire. So in 1814, we were still fighting the British. We fought a war with them in 1776. And what was that war? What do people know about the War of 1812? Well, not very much. I think they're revisionist historians, tell us that a lot of the war was about annexing Canada and making Canada part of the United States of America. But I think it was a war of national honor. There was disputes both with the French and the British, who were both running empires. I'm talking about naval disputes, trade disputes that the United States had suffered since 1776. And the British still wanted to take back over the colonies, and they fought another war in 1812, which the Democrat Republicans, led by Madison at that time, actually fought for. They got it. They actually had a declaration of war, 20-10 in the Senate, the necessary 2/3 majority to declare war. The populist group declared war to again distinguish themselves from empire. And who supported the empire? Well, that'd be the Federalists. The Federalists, with the central bank, with the trade, with the English, they wanted peace. We got to sort this stuff out because it's a little murky at the root. But these American citizens that believed in a populist movement, that believed in self-governance, who were opposed to federalism and opposed to an alliance with the Crown, and there had just been a treaty called the Jay Treaty between the United States and Great Britain that these populists rejected. They went to war. Washington was attacked. The White House was burned. And this war went on and on and on. In 1814, a lawyer named Francis Scott Key went to the British to try to negotiate the release of a doctor that he knew who had been captured and was on a ship. And through that series of serendipitous events, he ended up being a witness to the bombardment of Fort McHenry in 1814, and he penned the famous poem, The Star-Spangled Banner. Well, why did it matter so much? Why did this flag matter so much? Why did it matter? Because it symbolized, it was the repository, the meaning of that flag for the citizens of the United States. It was the Republican repudiation of empire. That's what it meant. And it still means that to this very day. Our flag means Republicanism. That's what it means. It doesn't mean Democrat liberal order. And if they get full control, just like they did here in Minnesota, where they got full control, they changed our state flag because they want to change these symbols and the symbolic meaning that all citizens derive from these potent images. And we may not know because our educational system has removed the truth, put a veil over the truth so we can't see it. But it doesn't take long when you put these two images next to each other. That one is about the freedom of the people and the other one is submission to the crown. So when Key saw that bombardment and the flag was never lowered, never destroyed, it was a miracle for him. A miracle. A miracle like in Judaism, there's the miracle of the lamp that never went out. We have this holiday called Hanukkah, and Hanukkah's 8 days because there was no oil to burn the lamp. the lamp that never burns out, that symbolizes the search for truth. There was no oil. It was only going to burn one day, and yet it burned for 8 days. It was a miracle. And so it has become very symbolic to the Jewish people of a miracle of the unextinguishable search for truth, which is inherent in these images. The entire image of the flag is about the search for truth because that is the bedrock of republicanism. So when we go and we see the flag on the 4th, and we recognize that the 4th is the ascendancy of republicanism here in the United States of America, and our founding documents, our Republican documents, political liberalism. So what did the left do? This political liberalism created so much freedom and creativity. It unleashed so much goodness in the world. So what did they do? They have been working on replacing that political liberalism with social liberalism, which destroys the bedrock upon which the whole experiment rests. And then when it falls apart, they say, see, it was that flag. It was always born of slavery. We have to fight this now. Yes, good and bad are always interrelated, but the same people that wanted to destroy that flag then want to destroy it now. The exact same people. Of course, it's many generations different, but it's the ideas in their head. Those that want an aristocracy, those that want control, those that want to stifle the creativity of the citizens and enslave them and create them as inventory in that slavery, drugs, and piracy business model, those are the left of today. That's who they are. And those of us that want to self-govern, that demand, we have to demand an end to lying. Like this lie that Joe Biden was competent. Look at how far these people will go to lie to us. We cannot go forward with lies. We must search for truth. That's why they're after Royce White so hard here in the local press, to try to make him into a liar, the very thing that he's not. They're trying to, clothe him with. So the liars, the Cantaloupe and Amy Klobuchar, they can continue. The people that we have Amy Klobuchar on tape telling us that Joe Biden is hyper competent. Come on. Go look for it. It's on my X page. Please follow me on X. I forget. Please, if you need tires, go to Target.com. I got to say it because we need your support. FreePeopleRadio.com, the store. Please, we're expanding the programming. We're expanding what we're doing. Thank you for listening. We need your support because we're working on ideas together that are lost. They're lost ideas. Republicanism is not a party. It's the name of a party, but it's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a worldview that's anti-corruption, anti-self-interest, that's rooted in the search for truth. That's what we're trying to conserve. We're trying to get this 1946 conservative movement, all those who will wake up and recognize they're conserving social liberalism, which we saw the start of in that first piece with Fred Astaire and Rita Hayworth. That was the germ seed coming out of Hollywood of social liberalism. There it was, a new symbol. And look how far we've come till today. Got a lot of work to do. I want to thank you for joining me. It's always a pleasure to be with you. I wish you the greatest health, the greatest possible relaxation and holiday weekend. Let us hope we can get through this holiday weekend with really a holiday. I'm going to ask Tanner to play a very entertaining further explication of this Francis Scott Key Star Spangled Banner, followed up with a beautiful musical rendition of the Star Spangled Banner. Stay with on this. I hope you can. We'll be back next Tuesday. Again, protest march at the Federal Reserve this Thursday morning, July 4th. Go to the campaign website to see the details. I wish you well. Thank you very much for joining.
Have a good night, everybody.
There was a lawyer once. His name was Francis Scott Key. He penned a song that I'm sure you're aware of. You've seen it. It's in most hymnals throughout our churches. It's called the national anthem. It is our song as an American. We go, however, to a ball game. We stand in our church services and we sing the words of that song, and they float over our minds and our lips, and we don't even realize what we're singing. Most of us have memorized it as a child, but we've never really thought about what it means. Let me tell you a story. Francis Scott Key was a lawyer in Baltimore. The colonies were engaged in vicious conflict with the mother country, Britain. Because of this conflict and the protractedness of it, they had accumulated prisoners on both sides. The American colonies had prisoners and the British had prisoners. And the American government initiated a move. They went to the British and they said, let us negotiate for the release of these prisoners. They said, we want to send a man out to discuss this with you. They were holding the American prisoners in boats about 1,000 yards offshore. And they said, we want to send a man by the name of Francis Scott Key. He will come out and negotiate to see if we can make a mutual exchange. On the appointed day, in a rowboat, he went out to this boat and he negotiated with the British officials. And they reached a conclusion that men could be exchanged on a one-for-one basis. Francis Scott Key, jubilant with the fact that he'd been successful, went down below in the boats, and what he found was a cargo hold full of humanity, men. And he said, men, I've got news for you tonight. You're free. He said, tonight I have negotiated successfully your return to the colonies. He said, you'll be taken out of this boat, out of this filth, out of your chains. As he went back up on board to arrange for their passage to the shore, the admiral came and he said, we have a slight problem. He said, we will still honor our commitment to release these men, but it'll be merely academic after tonight. It won't matter. And Francis Scott Key said, what do you mean? He said, well, Mr. Key, he said, tonight we have laid an ultimatum upon the colonies. Your people will either capitulate and lay down the colors of that flag that you think so much of, or you see that fort right over there, Fort Henry? He said, we're going to remove it from the face of the earth. He said, how are you going to do that? He said, if you will, scan the horizon of the sea. And as he looked, he could see hundreds of little dots. And he said, that's the entire British war fleet. He said, all of the gunpowder, all of the armament is being called upon to demolish that fort. It will be here within striking distance in a matter of about 2.5 hours. He said, the war is over. These men would be free anyway. He said, you can't shell that fort. He said, that's a large fort. He said, it's full of women and children. He says, it's predominantly not a military fort. He said, don't worry about it. They said, we've left them a way out. And he said, what's that? He said, do you see that flag way up on the rampart? He said, we have told them that if they will lower that flag, the shelling will stop immediately. And we'll know that they've surrendered, and you'll now be under British rule. Francis Scott Key went down below and told the men what was about to happen. And they said, how many ships? He said, hundreds. The ships got closer. Francis Scott Key went back up on top and he said, men, I'll shout down to you what's going on as we watch. As twilight began to fall, and as the haze hung over the ocean as it does at sunset, suddenly the British war fleet unleashed. He says the sound was deafening. There were so many guns that there were no reliefs. He said it was absolutely impossible to talk or hear. He said suddenly the sky, although dark, was suddenly lit. And he says from down below, all he could hear the men, the prisoners, saying was, tell us where the flag is. What have they done with the flag? Is the flag still flying over the rampart? Tell us. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours into the shelling, every time the bomb would explode and it would be close to the flag, they could see the flag in the illuminated red glare of that bomb, and Francis Scott Key would report down to the men below, it's still up. It's not down. The admiral came and he said, your people are insane. He said, what's the matter with them? He said, don't they understand this is an impossible situation? Francis Scott Key said he remembered what George Washington had said. He said the thing that sets the American Christian apart from all other people in the world is he will die on his feet before he'll live on his knees. The admiral said, we have now instructed all of the guns to focus on the rampart to take that flag down. He said, we don't understand something. Our reconnaissance tells us that that flag has been hit directly again and again and again, and yet it's still flying. We don't understand that. But he said, now we're about to bring every gun for the next 3 hours to bear on that point. Francis Scott Key said the barrage was unmerciful. All that he could hear was the men down below praying. The prayer, God, keep that flag flying where we last saw it. The sunrise came. He said there was a heavy mist hanging over the land, but the rampart was tall enough. There stood the flag, completely nondescript, in shreds. The flagpole itself was at a crazy angle, but the flag was still at the top. Francis Scott Key went aboard and immediately went into Fort Henry to see what had happened. And what he'd found had happened was that that flagpole and that flag had suffered repetitious direct hits. And when it had fallen, but men, fathers, who knew what it meant for that flag to be on the ground, although knowing that all of the British guns were trained on it, walked over and held it up humanly until they died. Their bodies were removed and others took their place.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the